Hello, Harley Schlanger.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you very much for being with us. My program is definitely, you might have heard in my intro, that it is about Afghanistan, and this is the way, about the way the new Taliban administration is governing this country for almost the last now 2-3 years. They have taken new new decisions, especially particularly about the women. Now even women will be not allowed to for medical education. So my question is, what is at the moment the perceptions of this Taliban government in Afghanistan, especially in West, especially in the first world? I'll use the word first, the US, because definitely your institute also work in the US too. So what is the perception, the growing perceptions? Are there toward more tolerations, or there might be a reactions, there might be a situations where the West or the Western capital will react the way Taliban is governing Afghanistan?
Well, I think if you want to look at the situation there, you have to start with the big picture. And the big picture is that you're situated in an area where there's a new great game going on. And so what we see on the surface does not indicate necessarily what's going on with the various intelligence agencies and governments involved. The Western view of the Taliban has been to keep them isolated, keep them down. But for years they were backing the Taliban against the Soviets, and then had various kinds of manipulations backwards and forwards. But the bigger issue is the question of India, Pakistan, China, and Russia. And Taliban in this case, and Afghanistan, is a bit of a pawn in that. They can be used to carry out operations against Pakistan, against China. No one knows exactly what's going on inside the government there, but we do know that there is a lack of resources, a lack of collaboration from the West. And so how do you expect there to be improvement? And it leaves a big burden on Pakistan because there has been this constant barrage across the border there, which is not stopping. In fact, it's escalating.
Harley, as you rightly mentioned, that as the new games going on in these regions where China is the focus, might be the Central Asian countries, and across then is the Russia, then Iran, and definitely India. But one thing which is quite obvious, and that is the presence of terrorist networks, various terrorist networks in Afghanistan. These terrorist networks are threatening Pakistan, threatening China, threatening the Central Asian country, including the international focused terrorist network like Al-Qaeda, like the Daesh, etc. So does it mean that the West is the silence of the West, or the way you said it, that due to this great game, maybe the Taliban administration is used in future by these great powers? So does it? Can we say that these terrorist networks, definitely they are being financed from somewhere, definitely they are being given the arms and ammunition from somewhere, definitely they have been, their narrative is being propagated from somewhere. So does it mean that even the West and the US, their silence over it is in a way we can manifest it in a way that it is an approval? It is their consent to let them work from here.
Well, I think it's clear that the Taliban terrorists that have been involved in attacks on Pakistan are very well armed. They have certain technologies, including drone technologies, that are not necessarily being produced in Afghanistan, or where's the money coming from, and the manipulation, the narrative that's being used to deploy them. What, for example, is the gain of a Taliban network on the border with Pakistan of attacking Pakistan? Are they trying to take over Pakistan? Are they trying to carve out a bit of territory? Now, I think that that's the mentality of the people who are involved in this, but they can easily be manipulated and used by bigger powers. And we see that right now in Syria. You know, the attack on the Assad government, it came right after the ceasefire in Lebanon between Israel and Hezbollah. And immediately the terrorists moved in and are now running rampant against Syria. This is something that's being directed from the outside. Much of the terrorism, and I think many of your viewers know that much of the terrorist functioning in Afghanistan had its origins from the CIA and British intelligence. So I would not be surprised at all if local grievances or local leaders are being whispered in their ear from somewhere else and told, if you do this, you'll get some benefits. That's been the pattern of CIA and MI6 throughout the recent period.
So it means that you are also of the opinion that the Taliban government or regime is being tolerated by the West, including the US, may be used as a pretext for intervention in the future in the region if the US or the West feel the need of it?
Let me give you two examples. Ukraine and Israel, two countries that are being used now for the sake of broader imperial interests against the emerging alliance of the BRICS countries, Russia, India, China, and so on, the global south. There's a very important development taking place to break away from the weaponization of the dollar, from the sanctions regimes, from the control of credit and trade from London and Wall Street. And that's under attack. And countries like Israel, like Zelensky in Ukraine, and even in its own way, the Taliban, can be used to disrupt the natural development of relations in the region. So, for example, the interests of Pakistan are served by an alliance with China and the Belt and Road Initiative, and also with Russia. But what happens if you have a terrorist operation unleashed that destabilizes whole sections of Pakistan? It means that you're not going to be able to concentrate on the bigger development picture that's coming into being. And it's our view at the Schiller Institute that you cannot look at these local situations without realizing there's this bigger picture of manipulation, of control. It's what's called the unipolar order, and they don't want to give up their power.
Yeah, you mentioned this this regional, as you use the word, weaponization of the dollars. Then BRICS is now more concerned. Definitely, it is the BRICS policy now coming up with their own currency. So there are two major organizations, and definitely like BRICS, which include Iran, which include China, which include Russia, which include India, the most important countries surrounding, and Pakistan is also opting to join the BRICS. So it's a very powerful and very influential organization. Then we have the SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is also China, Pakistan, Russia, India, and the other Central Asian countries, including Iran. So in the presence of these such powerful organizations and bodies, what is the role of these bodies then? If the West and the US are so powerful that despite two superpowers like China and Russia, and economic powers, emerging economic powers in India too, so how the US and the Western bodies operate in the midst of these two powerful organizations in this region?
Well, I would argue that the leadership in the West is minimally showing the kind of senility that we see with President Biden, or worse, a form of insanity. The idea of fighting a nuclear war against Russia, which is now being discussed by people in NATO, shows that they're not thinking. Here's the important thing. What Putin laid out at the last BRICS summit in Kazan, Russia, is that they don't want to fight against the dollar. They want cooperation with the West, but they're not going to give up their sovereignty to get it. And the demand from the West is that countries such as Pakistan, such as Indonesia, Malaysia, all the growing global south countries have to play the game as it's dictated from London, from the International Monetary Fund, and from the Washington Consensus. That was acceptable in the past, but it's no longer acceptable. Now, secondly, the Western governments are collapsing one after another. Where I live in Germany, the German government just collapsed. In France, the French government collapsed. In Britain, you've got the Starmer government, which is as unpopular as the government they just ousted. In the United States, the Democratic Party was just defeated. So there are definitely dramatic changes in the world. But instead of finding out what is it that nations of the global south need, such as Afghanistan, such as Pakistan, instead you're being told you have to stick to the International Monetary Fund requirements, just as recently happened with Sri Lanka. So this is an old imperial era which is coming to an end. The question is, do those imperial countries intend to use their superior military and economic power to impose their will, or can there be negotiations and diplomacy? And that's what the Schiller Institute is advocating. We have a conference coming up this weekend where that's the major topic. Can we get a new security and development order based on the principles of the old non-aligned movement and the Bandung Conference, or will there be a clash between these two bodies that you just identified?
Last question. How do you see the Trump-Afghanistan?
To see Trump, you said?
Donald Trump, Afghanistan. What is expected of Donald Trump vis-a-vis Afghanistan? What do you expect of him?
Let me tell you what I know of Donald Trump. Expect the unexpected. The only thing predictable about him is that he's unpredictable. Now, on the one hand, he's made a big deal about how Biden blew the departure from Afghanistan. So he's not blaming Afghanistan, he's blaming Biden. But remember, he was the one initially who said we have to get out of Afghanistan. I think what we're going to see is a very interesting period ahead where we'll find out whether Trump is serious about avoiding new wars. I personally think he is. I think he wants to get out of Ukraine. I think he wants to stop the fighting in the Middle East because he's more interested in making deals for business and economic growth. If he is, he'll recognize that he's got to deal with his own country's players on Wall Street, with the British, with the Brussels and NATO. And as you probably know, he's not too sympathetic towards NATO and the Europeans. So there may be a chance for a significant break from the West. The problem is that there's still a lot of bad people around who go back to the Bush and Obama and Biden policy who are making the decisions. We'll see how independent Trump really is.
The very last, you just remind me of one thing, the Trump's approach toward the region, particularly the West, and this $40 million, the Trump's approach toward the region, particularly the West, and this $40 million reportedly pumped into Afghanistan every month, as almost every week or every month, as reported by various bodies. How do you see it will be continued when Trump take over, or there will be increase in it, or there will be decrease in it?
Well, I think because of the budget crisis in the United States, that anything that's coming from the U.S. government will be cut back, except for money going to regime change, like in Georgia or Syria and places like that. They're going to continue funding the intelligence operations until we in the United States shut that down. But for the sake of the world, including Pakistan, Afghanistan, and all the countries in Eurasia, the United States has to give up its imperial intention. We ought to realize we're in the 21st century, and empires cannot last and should not last.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is where the elephants lie. Thank you very much, Harley, for being with us in the program. Gran Kutun Kodau Mangasara Harley Schlanger.